This is Lee Vetitoe. He was born March 4th, 1983, and he served in Operation Iraqi Freedom. His branch of service is the Army, and his highest rank was Sergeant E5. This is May 20th, 2017 in Caledonia, Michigan. I'm Aiden Erpter. I met Gary through a family friend, and my sister is doing audio. The interview is being conducted for the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress. So where were you born, Gary?
Sure thing, Aiden, and thank you for having me. So I was born in Detroit back in 1983. It's been a few years now. So I grew up over on the east side of the state. I grew up in kind of a rural town when I got a little bit older, and after about 3 years of graduating from high school, I went to college for a year, tried working out in jobs here and there, and then 9/11 happened, of course, and that took place when I was in college, and that first kind of gave me that call of action initially, but I wasn't ready personally. And then the Iraq War kicked off in March of 2003, and I remember being in my mom's living room and thinking that my generation is going to war, and I wanted to join them and do my part, as a patriotic, very patriotic citizen. So then I enlisted shortly after that. Conducted basic training. Started that in March 2004 in Fort Knox, Kentucky, rather. And I went through OSUT, which is one station unit training. And what they did was they combined basic training and your job training together. And that's when I was going through to be a Cavalry Scout, 19 Delta as an MOS, a military occupational specialty. And so for the next 17 months, it was dedicated to learning how to soldier, learning how to fight, interact, work as a team from different individuals from all over the country. And after that, completed that in July of 2004. And then I was stationed at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and I was there for 5 years. And during my time there, I did 2 deployments to Iraq. The initial deployment I was on we started in October of 2005, and it was to support Operation Iraqi Freedom. And we did a lot of different missions during that time. We were responsible for securing part of a MSR, which was a main supply route called Tampa, which I believe is Highway 1 in Iraq. We had probably about a 40-click or a 40-kilometer stretch of a freeway really, to secure. And we did that for about half of our deployment, and then the other half of our deployment was spent kind of down around Mahmudiya, which was part of the Triangle of Death. And we spent some time really searching for, of course, the bad guys, but we spent a lot of time looking for different weapons caches. Now, granted, we didn't find any of the weapons of mass destruction, but we did find plenty of SAM missiles, the surface-to-air missiles, 155 millimeter mortar rounds, crew-served weapons, large machine guns, individual weapons. Excuse me. And so that really wrapped up the first deployment I had from October 2005 until October 2006. And then we spent another year back in garrison, back at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, training up and getting ready to support the surge that General Petraeus came up with. And during that surge, I spent most of my time in a city or a village called Ghazalia. And Ghazalia was described to me as the Hollywood of Baghdad, if you will. So during Saddam's reign, many of his senior military officials and senior Ba'athist Party members lived in Ghazalia. So our focus in Ghazalia was a little bit different than securing a route and searching for caches of weapons. Excuse me. We were still looking for weapons, but we put a lot of focus on HVTs, high value targets. So identifying individuals who were responsible, different members of maybe Al Qaeda or other insurgent groups that we were fighting at the time, and working with different sister units. And we've also had an opportunity to work with different special operations who were looking for their own high HVT, high value targets. So I got to interact with some of the special forces guys, the SAS, the British Special Forces, as well as the Rangers, all very top-notch, very highly trained and professional individuals. And we often kind of would help either do security or kind of after-action contact with them as well. And we did that until it was November of 2008. We were extended a couple months beyond the traditional one-year deployment for the Army for us. And then after that, I was detailed as a military recruiter, and I then was sent to Fort Jackson, South Carolina, to where I learned what the military is looking for with their recruiters, and then that's what brought me here to West Michigan. Was recruiting, and then I recruited for the Army from 2009 until 2012. When I got out, about 5 years now, about 5 years ago, I've worked a couple different jobs as well, some skilled trades, but then I found myself actually recruiting for West Michigan's largest employer, and they gave me the opportunity to do military veteran recruitment as well too. So I used to get folks into the military, and now I'm trying to get them out of the military and help them find meaningful work after their careers in the service as well. So that's kind of my time in a nutshell, if you will.
Wow, that's really cool. When you were in Iraq, did you ever go into combat?
Sure. So my time in Iraq was definitely focused on securing, searching, and destroying enemy forces, and ensuring that myself, my team, our Army, and coalition forces really had the opportunity of freedom of maneuver through the area. So it was in a handful of conflicts and battles, if you will, from firefights to multiple. During the first deployment, we've seen a lot more of the traditional IEDs, improvised explosive devices. Personally, blown up a couple times, maybe 3 times you could count, as far as being in that vehicle. But really, we spent a lot of time searching for the enemy, but what we would often find is on those main supply routes, or those large freeways, you'd often see different holes dug along the side of the road, or the pavement maybe looks a little bit different, or there could be a 5-gallon bucket on the side of the road, just something that looked out of place, or even a bag of trash, or a donkey carcass we've seen before. And then often they would have one of those mortar rounds that are probably about that big around and about that tall, and it's solid metal filled with explosives. And then what they would do, the insurgents, they would often have 2 ways, or a couple different ways. They would have it set up to go off. One of which was very common that we've seen was tied to these older Nokia phones during the flip phone ages, but they were solid phones, and all they would do is literally give a call to that phone, and then it would set off that IED. And traditionally what they would like to do is depending upon if it's a long convoy of vehicles or a group of 4 vehicles or whatever have you, they'd wait till one of the lead vehicles or another vehicle would get by it, uh, set that explosion off, various different ways. And then sometimes, once that explosion goes off, they would like to then begin firing at you, and that's when you would return fire and you would go into your tactics, whether it's pushing through the kill zone, as they would call it, or securing the area and fighting off the resistance or the enemy, and then moving on and taking a battle damage assessment and seeing if you needed to go back, rearmor, regroup, or kind of go from there.
This is kind of more of an optional question, but have you ever witnessed any casualties or destruction that still sits with you today?
Sure. So, and this is a very good question, and I try to be transparent with this as well. I do suffer, or rather, I've been diagnosed with PTSD. I know some people call it PTS, post-traumatic stress syndrome, rather than disorder. But yeah, I've been involved in a few different items, whether it's removing casualties, removing dead bodies, whether it's the insurgents or coalition forces. I've had an opportunity to perform battle aid, first aid, on different members of both coalition forces and the enemy as well too, because again we adhere to our ROE, Rules of Engagement, set forth by the Geneva Convention. And once the enemy has been subdued, then it's up to us to ensure that you provide welfare for those individuals, and sometimes that does include performing first aid on them as well too, and getting them to the next level of care, which is ideal, because then what we would do after that would use different human intelligence teams, to cross-examine them and see if we can get other intelligence and pursue other opportunities.
When you were out in the field, how do you stay in contact with families and friends back home?
That's a great question. So this is one of my favorite things, and I think a lot of soldiers would say the same, whether it's email communication. My time in the service was MySpace. That was a big thing versus Facebook, which I enjoyed that. But we also had, at the different bases, sometimes they would have call centers to where you could call home as well too, or you could actually get cell phones over there as well. But I myself and many others, we enjoy just good old-fashioned paper and pencil or snail mail, because we'd often get care packages. And I could tell you, a bag of candy, a fresh pair of underwear, and a stick of deodorant goes a long way when you don't have those luxuries every day. And always looking forward to mail call. And what's always neat about that is, traditionally, the people that you serve with, you develop a very strong bond with, and we always like to share and trade with one another. So, when you got a package or I got a package, we kind of all got a package, and we really, shared a lot of together, and the brotherhood. It was really neat from the time in service.
That's awesome. Do you have any other family members that went into the forces?
Sure. So I'll say kind of my generation, not really. I had a bunch of friends from school, and of course met many friends down the road. But I had 2 uncles serve. I think one was in the Navy, another was in the Marines, and then my grandfather, he served in the Army, and he always tells me his story that he enlisted around World War II time and the Korean War, and he actually lied about his age to get in. So he enlisted, I think, when he was 15 or 16, and I guess a lot of people his age from the country did that. And so he lied about his age and joined the service. And whenever I think about my service, I think about him, because I remember as a kid he always asked me what I wanted to do, and he always said I wouldn't like the Army because he served in the Army, and it wasn't for him. But I can tell you, it was for me. And I tell folks the best thing I did was was to join the service, and the second best thing I ever did was get out of the service. So, but I did enjoy it, and I think a lot to him about that.
When you were off duty, like when you were in Iraq, what would you guys do to like pass the time?
Sure. So I can tell you I read a lot of books, watched a lot of movies, PT, physical training, did a lot of exercise, but also, it was a chance to kind of decompress with where I was at and kind of my operation, depending upon what our mission was. We would often spend most of our time outside the wire. Anywhere from a 12-hour mission to a 48-hour mission. During the first deployment, we drove back and forth between BIOP, Baghdad International Airport, and we stayed at some main camps there. And then during the second deployment, we spent more of our time out at forward operating bases, different FOBs. So we we shared a compound. We had a larger house for my troop, for the U.S. Army, and then right next to us we had the Iraqi Army. So they had one house, we had one house, and then we just had some cement walls up around us. But then we were right inside of the middle of an Iraqi town, really, of a township, if you will. But I remember everything from those activities to one thing I enjoyed my second time was spending time with the Iraqi Army, learning more about the Iraqi culture, as well as spending time with our interpreters, trying to learn more dialect, more Arabic, and it was neat because we would sit around and smoke the hookah, smoke the tobacco, drink some tea or chai, talk about our day, and I would teach them some American slang, and they would teach me some Iraqi slang. And we always thought we were the coolest because we knew the inside and outs. But yeah, you found ways to entertain yourself. So
do you think you picked up on any of their Iraqi language?
I did. There's a few things that I remember and I still like to use. A couple things definitely from the traditional commands of stop, hands up, lay down on the ground. So on and so forth. But this is probably a little funny, but I was also a bit of a flirt when I was overseas, just having fun with my Iraqi interpreters, and they taught me how to just flirt with the local populace as well too. And it was just fun to just think about not just in a combat theater, but we're all people and we all enjoy different experiences and smiling as well too. So I think that was a big part for us overseas too, is not just the fighting, but a lot of our mission was trying to win the hearts and minds of them as well too. So and whether it was through humanitarian aid, or as simple as playing soccer with them. That's one thing I enjoyed over there as well too, is with the little kids. I mean, they love playing, and I could play soccer myself. So even fully dressed up in my IBA, and all my uniform and all my gear and weapons and all that stuff, I would still go out there and run around and chase the kids around playing soccer with them. So that was a lot of fun too.
When you came back home, like, how was it transitioning back into regular civilian life?
Sure. So that was it was a bit of a challenge, and I think more or less the two things that really stuck with me, getting back, transitioning to a civilian, was one, driving on the roads, because you still had a heightened sense of urgency, I guess, or awareness. Anytime that debris was on the side of the road, or driving with friends or family members, always found myself, if I was driving with other people I knew, always found myself sitting at different intervals like we did in the service, whether it's 50-meter intervals and kind of keeping our spacing there, as well as, having a little bit of anxiety when I see something on the side of the road. And also being in crowds was difficult for a while. I remember during my second deployment, I took a trip to Disney World, and I loved Disney World as a kid, and I still enjoyed my trip, but I just remember having a lot of anxiety being around large groups of people. So that was a key there, but I think even just almost the sense of urgency that civilians have compared to the military, or even just kind of the tempo that military folks operate as, and when it's time to get in line at the grocery store, veterans or military folks, you'll see them, everyone gets in line, gets in their place, ready to go, check out, very efficient, and on to the next one. Civilians, you got a couple here, a couple there, grabbing some stuff off the rack, maybe looking at a magazine, and you're sitting here looking at your watch like, come on guys, we could have saved 17 seconds. Let's go. Let's go. Let's keep it moving. So, but that was a unique opportunity, and I think, you having a little bit of that sense of urgency that I developed in the military, but still coming back as a civilian and kind of meshing the two has helped me both in my professional and personal life as well too. So
do you have a family? Like, have you raised a family now?
Sure. So currently I do have a wife and 2 kids. I have a 6-year-old daughter and a 9-year-old son, just turned 9 yesterday. And that when after my second deployment, when I got out of the service, or when I got out of being on the line and became a recruiter, that's when I started my family with my kids. And there were some challenges there. I learned quickly that my kids are not my soldiers, so I can't tell them and order them around like I could my soldiers. So there was a learning curve there for me. But my kids, they're wonderful, wonderful people that I'm so thankful for, and they give me a lot of inspiration each day. And it's one thing I tell my son is the first time I looked into his eyes, going back to having some troubles with PTSD and everything else. I always tell him he's my hero because he was someone that helped bring me back. So,
what life lessons have you learned from serving?
Sure. So, a couple life lessons that I've learned from my time in the service is one, how amazing it is to have a hot shower and use a porcelain toilet. I can tell you I really appreciate that. But really just, how valuable life is. Just very cherish it.